Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator. I'm your host, Brian West, here to give you your top 8 headlines developing news stories that made it throughout the week. Now, these top 8 stories are only documented for records and to highlight topics for those in the business of talk radio, talk media, and those who just want to stay informed. Now, let's get to the top 8 stories that made it into The Mediator this week. Story number 1, ladies and gents. How the spotlight got pointed on America's youth. Now, after a mass shooting in Florida by a teenager who was apparently obsessed with guns, the spotlight is now on the youth of America. While young Americans plead their case for gun control, adults are curious about their current hobbies. Now, in a report centered around how Armenia has been breeding a generation of chess players, many new voices are speaking up about how America is shaping the youth in this country compared to Armenia. Now, I'm sure that this story will continue to develop in the coming weeks due to the center of attention being on youth in America. Story number 2. Is the field of science getting too big to fail? Now, in medical advances like engineering viruses and finding cures, the field of science has somehow grown more complex than religion itself. Now, in all of the discoveries and mathematical equations, even in the field of technology, one question lingers, and that is, what would happen if something went wrong, and do we have the money and resources to combat such a scare if something did go wrong? Now, this story emerged from a headline about Alzheimer's, the Powassan virus in the West Nile, and Zika disease. This also has something to do with the research that has been taking place about engineering such virus as smallpox and horsepox. Story number 3. What does laws and the NRA have to do with gun violence? Now, if you're a member of the NRA or have something to do with making laws in the United States, you may notice that every time something happens to someone, especially when someone kills someone and you're working on the job at a gun store or a part of the NRA or some legislative branch, you may notice the phone it may be ringing off the hook in regards to something making national news. Now, a new reality is starting to set in, and people are wondering if guns have anything to do with people wanting to kill other people. Like the old saying goes, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So the question is why attack legislators and the NRA? That's the big question. Now, this will be the number one topic as we get closer and closer to the midterms because people want action and prevention. Now, as this centralized story develops more and Congress takes punch after punch, the problem may have more to do with just being distracted. Story number 4. Will budget cuts do more harm than good? Now, one branch funded by the Federal Reserves that may be chopped by $150 million is the Consumer Financial Protections Bureau, which protects Americans from getting ripped off by financial firms. Now, while the Trump administration centers around more budget cuts, we don't know what holes will open after all of the cutting and trimming. So once they start cutting the budget, we don't know what the outcome will be in the future. Now, as the story develops, we can only hope that each budget cut does more good than harm. So we just keep our fingers crossed. Story number 5. Which party will win on immigration? Now, Trump wants a wall and claims that Mexico only sends their worst citizens to become United States citizens. He's basically said that they only send rapists, criminals, and drug addicts to become United States citizens, getting rid of their worst. And Obama was known as the deporter-in-chief by some Latinos. But after brutal headlines throwing President Trump under the bus when it comes to DACA, the real issue now is who has the better plan, Democrats or Republicans? And is the conservative route better by placing America first, or is the progressive route better? Take who helps progress. Now, it may help to keep a close eye on this developing story because it will affect economic situations. Illegal immigrants are often taking jobs that other Americans can fill. So keep an eye on the story, developing story. Story number 6. Trump, his tariffs on steel, and China. Now, if you were not paying attention, then you may have missed a headline centered around tariffs on steel. That's a tax on imports of steel coming into the United States. Now, this would not only affect China, but also Brazil, South Korea, and Russia also. Now, it seems the Trump agenda is geared around more domestic-based steel production. So he wants more steel produced in America. Now, the president has until April to decide on across-the-board tariffs aimed at selected nations, or putting a cap on how much steel comes into the United States. So he has until April to decide on whether he wants to put tariffs or taxes on other countries bringing in steel into America, or just putting a cap on how much steel the country imports. Now, the president has weighed heavily on how China has gained an edge by distributing cheap price steel around the globe. Now, the premise in his agenda is to create jobs, and he feels the only way to do that is to make America the front runner in producing its own steel at home. Story number 7, and the final 2 stories that made it into the Mediator this week. Should the rich be taxed more? Now, if Bill Gates says tax the rich even after he's paid over $10 billion in taxes, does that mean tax the rich more? So basically, they're saying if you tax the rich more, this may be the answer. Now, it seems to be the only solution to balance the budget and the only solution to feeding those in need. In a financial seesaw battle and a political war between the rich, poor, and the middle class, the question now is, does it work, or is it the solution? Or does Bill Gates have a leg in the debate here that should we tax the rich to make ends meet more? Now, all we're left with is the question on whom do we tax more to pay the bills? Now, there are numerous new financing plans for medical care. Some say give everyone a check once a month, while others say earn your money in America. And that debate continues to sit around. One problem or one question is, should the rich pay for everybody's problems? And that is an issue. Now, there are also some big concerns about how people are receiving government funds and not using them wisely. Basically, like welfare, people abusing those privileges. Now, this story is circulating due to a comment made once again by Bill Gates, by basically saying it seems fairer for rich people to pay more money and pay more in taxes. It's a big understanding and a big question that we have in this country. Now, this story could grow due to the political battle that we see to want better results in regards to government spending. Now, let's get to the final story that made it into the Mediator this week. Story lucky number 8 ball 8. Now, the story reads, the media and mental health. That's the headline. Now let's get to the story. It says, if you noticed people dodging the media, then you may also find out that they have information that the media needs. If you notice someone acting strange, then you may have some understanding of mental health. These two subjects affect one another because people often reflect what they see. Now, this alone affects mental health. Now, when a mass shooting incident occurs and someone shoots somebody else and it gets to the top of the news, chances are that some copycats are watching. Now, as the story develops, the new energy that everyone channels may be on how people manage their time and what they're watching that affects their mental health. So that is story number 8 that made into the Mediator, talking about how mental health and the media is starting to shape what's happening in America and across the world. So people are reflecting what they're seeing in the media and on the news. I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Mediator this week with me, Brian West. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you want to show us some support, go to our website and sponsor a program, buy something, click on something, watch something, or just read something. I want to thank you so much for tuning into the top 8 stories that made it this week and that may affect you, that you may want to pay attention to. Thank you so much for tuning to The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.